Okay, so after over a year of waiting, I think the U.S. Observer people have finally come out with their article about the Charles Dyer case. It's the result of a pretty close to a year-long investigation. They present their legal perspective on the case, I think, regarding mainly the accusations made by the ex-wife. We all have to realize that with all of the back and forth between Charles Dyer's alleged supporters, that what got him convicted were the statements of the ex-wife and the kid. And so that's what the investigator, apparently Lauren Day from the U.S. Observer, had been going after. I had spoken with Ed Snook a couple of times about the case. I'd spoken with one other person at the U.S. Observer about the case, but I'm not sure if it was this Lauren Day person or not. However, my perspective on this was not directly addressed in this article. Okay, and I was looking at the case from the outside. However, I did advise people in the defense team to hire the U.S. Observer to pursue the case. And I want to make something very clear. The U.S. Observer situation was paid for this, okay? They did not volunteer. Supposedly, they put in a lot of their own expense money after they got involved with the case. This was not a volunteer situation. We were not able to get them involved until relatively late in the game when they were paid. And then I think later on, what happened was a person who orchestrated getting them involved and paid initially was Debbie Swan. She's got to deserve credit for that, but she's not a lawyer, she's not an investigator, she's not some kind of agent operative in a professional sense. But when she really got heavily involved in the case, it ran afoul of what Ed Snook thought he was going to try to accomplish with the case. So there was some impatience issues, there was some personality issues. There were a lot of infighting going on within the circles of Charles Dyer's supporters, and we have to look at what's going on between Texas and Oklahoma with that. There is, there was a lot going on, okay, and out here in Oregon, people look at. I think that it's just going to be looked at differently. Over there in Texas and Oklahoma, it's a mess. I got to say it. People don't really know what side they're on with a lot of the stuff. And one of the ways you can look at that is the players, even on the opposition side. There was a guy who was heavily involved with trying to instigate prosecutions against Charles Dyer, and that was a guy by the name of James Nix. He had run a website by the name of Hate Trackers, I think gossipboy.com. We really didn't know who he was, but this is James Nix in a relatively recent photo. We really didn't know who he was because he was pretty good at concealing his identity. There were allegations that he worked for either the FBI or the Southern Poverty Law Center, or he was attempting to seek employment from them. And he apparently, at the same time, this guy had a lot of stuff going on. He was really trying to be an underworld player in Oklahoma City. Among other things, oddly enough, he got caught, and this is on a regular news website, doing a Craigslist scam, a rental Craigslist scam. He apparently, the local police in Oklahoma didn't like the fact that somebody was stamping his get-out-of-jail-free card pretty regularly, meaning that he had some sort of relationship with the government that allowed him to not be prosecuted or not spend a lot of time in jail if he got caught committing a crime. And so whatever that status was, it was strong enough that it created conflict between, I'm guessing at this point, but between the FBI and local law enforcement in Oklahoma City. So local law enforcement in Oklahoma City went with a press release. They got the reporters involved and reported this stuff. And in the article, they reported that James Nix, they gave us this picture, and they explained that he was also the owner of the Gossip Boy Hate Trackers website. Now, when I questioned somebody at the Southern Poverty Law Center about whether or not they had any relationship with the guy, they've stonewalled me. Okay, they totally stonewalled me. They would not confirm or deny. They just stonewalled the questions repeatedly. I don't have any long-standing relationship with either group, but I posted the questions on their websites, and they just chose never to answer it. The thing is that WRAM, which is reportedly one of the militia websites, they have reported to be involved with the Charles Dyer case, but here's the thing. There was a guy going by the name of eDogZ 318, 218, something like that, on several websites. And he at one time had been a moderator at this website, and then he became convinced that anybody and everybody in the movement or connected with any of the websites was, somehow an undercover informant or something to that effect. And me and him don't get along. On the other hand, I got to say he's not totally full of shit. And there was that kind of stuff was going on because it just the evidence is just too much out there. Even in this case here, one of the moderators apparently, or one of the senior people there is posting about James Nix, because James Nix kind of hated everybody. And James Nix was not really, he's not a part of the Patriot movement or anything. He considered himself actually kind of almost a rival to SBLC, but I think he was also trying to get in on some of that grant money and donation money and payment from the same people who support SBLC. So what happens here is this OKDF person is claiming, they kind of talk a lot about James Nix. So if you do a Google search on James Vincent Nix and then get into the WRAM site, you'll see the same article. And in this paragraph, this guy at this militia thing begins to talk about how his relationship with the FBI and U.S. Marshals as a voluntary informant is superior to James Nix's relationship, and his relationship with the gay, lesbian, transgender community is also superior to James Nix's relationship. So, here, it's kind of hard to deny if somebody, if somebody starts calling names and says, you're a faggot snitch or collaborator with a government type thing, kind of hard to, for the guys at WRAM to deny that. They apparently brag about it a lot. So, you got to realize this is what was in the middle of Charles Dyer's defense case. I mean, these people had embedded themselves in it deeply. I don't know how you do this. I don't know how you develop that close of a relationship with the FBI and U.S. Marshals and Sheriff's Departments and all these people and still maintain a whole lot of integrity is an asset for a criminal defense situation. I know lawyers, and yes, lawyers always have to kind of rub shoulders, but there's a point when you can't cross the bridge from, being polite to people and you got to shake hands or say hi outside the courtroom or something like that versus, collaboration and fraternization. It reaches a point where you've crossed a line, and apparently these guys at WRAM, they don't know where that line is. Okay, they really don't. You can't. I mean, I don't know what else to say about that. But here there was a courthouse news service. This was related to some other crimes that James Nix was doing, and apparently he had managed to piss off some people there in Oklahoma. So, but I don't know if he ever went to jail either. So there was a bunch of stuff back and forth over how he ran a gay prostitution service or porn site or something. That's kind of like what all these people are associated with. And then, of course, we have Jim Stachowiak at Freedom Fighter Radio. He had originally been a supporter of Charles Dyer. And then what happened was there was a lot of infighting in the defense side. So a lot of people turned against Jim, but there was a lot of situations where enemies of the enemies aren't the friends. Okay, so as I get back to the U.S. Observer situation, They did their job, and in spite of a whole lot of interference, flack, and static, they've done their job and produced an investigative report. And the investigative report is truthful and factual. It shows that there was a fair amount of wrongdoing in the prosecution side of Charles Dyer's case, and that the defense was effectively neutralized. And it reaches the point where there was not an effective defense, especially at the third trial. There was no effective defense at that trial. The lawyer, I don't know how they had influenced him. I don't know what was going on with that. I wasn't there. There's a whole lot of people with a whole lot of speculation, but what we do know is the lawyer took very little action to defend Charles Dyer. We do know that even though it was a state-level prosecution, the FBI was very deeply involved with the case from beginning to end. We know that James Nix was also a principal player in the case from beginning to end. But for whatever reason, he is not directly addressed as an issue in U.S. Observer, I think primarily because he didn't testify when the thing went to court. The situation with Debbie Swan, whether or not somebody loves her, hates her, or just wants to bone her, or whatever was going on with that, she showed up after the original allegations that were made. So she didn't testify against Charles Dyer. She attempted to be involved with the defense. There was a whole shitstorm surrounding that. But she was not responsible for the prosecution. She was not responsible for the charges. And it's pretty clear that whatever her issues are, even though Ed Snook at the U.S. Observer kind of implies that maybe she's working for some particular agency, there's no official indication of it. There's no court record saying there is. There's nothing that anyone's been able to come up with that says there is. Although there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that maybe she's bad news one way or another. There's a tremendous amount of circumstantial evidence with a lot of people who had gotten themselves involved with the case one way or another. Tremendous amount of circumstantial evidence with the people associated with WRAM. And it gets difficult to reconcile, moderators and people bragging about how they have such a tight, informative relationship with the FBI and U.S. Marshals, yet would somehow become deeply involved with the defense team on Charles Dyer, or even, anybody can have an opinion commenting on the case, but holy shit, I don't know what to say about that. And that's not even getting into the situation with